Welcome to our presentation on food security. We are Team Food Security Maven and are students from Queen MMA. It was a privilege to work on a topic like food security. It is an evolving issue around the world. As we looked into the subject, we have much better appreciation of the topic. We have adopted Zero Hunger as key theme for this work. Let's look into what we are trying to do. The world is experiencing high level of food deficit. We want to understand the phenomenon across different regions, countries, and drill down on what exactly drives food scarcity and provide an analytical solution for it. As you can see from the graph, undernourishment is predicted to increase across the globe, and the root cause is food deficit. There are several factors that impact food deficit. Our goal is to understand which of these are significant and can we measure their impact. Out of the 5 pillars, we decided to work on the 4th pillar, technology, to improve security and sustainable agriculture. That will be our focus as we do the analysis over here. Let's look into the data overview. After some rigorous search, we found a data set which captured the variables we wanted to explore. There was a significant amount of time spent on cleaning and transforming these variables. Sophisticated tools such as Alteryx and R were used to combine, melt, and mutate the data. What you see here is 14 years of data worth from 2000 to 2014, 214 countries, and 31 different factors. This data has been taken from Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. From the data, what we see are some of the key indicators: availability, access, stability, and utilization. As we will do our analysis, we will look into some of these factors and some of the key indicators from these factors what impact food deficit. Let's look into what drives food deficit. Since it can be daunting to even understand the large data set, we started our exploration with a correlation plot to get feel for our data. This plot focuses on how much effect one variable can affect on another. From the correlation plot that you're seeing, it shows a few indicators such as access to sanitation facilities drive food deficit. In the plot, we can see an increase in energy derived from cereal and tubers, corresponding to increase in food deficit. And on the other hand, increase in access to sanitation facilities correspond decrease in food deficit. This plot is just a representation how these indicators move and do not confirm whether these indicators actually causes food deficit to increase or decrease. Knowing that these are some of the key indicators from correlation, we selected the top 3 that we believe will give us some more exploration: depth of food deficit, share of dietary energy supply derived from cereal, roots, and tubers, and population with access to sanitation facilities. These indicators provide information useful to access the utilization dimension of food security outcomes. So to further analyze, we looked into the regions across the world which impact food deficit and dietary energy supply trend. Let's look into the graphs. As you can see from the graph, the depth of food deficit is actually improving for almost all the regions. But we see some significant improvement in Latin America versus Asia and Africa. There's some opportunity still there. Let's look into the regional food deficit and sanitation facilities trend, and again across the same regions. When you look into the graph, again what you see here is significant improvement in Latin America, definitely opportunity in Asia and Africa. But one of the key observations here is that in last 2 years, Africa is showing negative trend in food deficit. This view gives us good understanding of different regions, and we were motivated to see how different countries across the regions are impacting. So from the region, let's look into the different countries. We looked at Latin America, we saw improvement. Let's also look at Asia and Africa, but first Latin America. What you see here, most of the countries are moving towards the top quartile. Definitely improvement. This allowed us to further think that we may need to do clustering to find out countries where the problem persists. Now let's look into Asia. Again, we see significant improvements here. Definitely opportunities in some of the countries. Look into countries like Iraq and Yemen. There is some deterioration in food security, and this can be due to a special factor. It is political instability. Now let's look into Africa. When you look into the data here from Africa and all the regions moving, it is a wide spread. And that widespread continues. There is definitely a bigger opportunity here. There are a few countries like Djibouti. Most of the countries are going backward, other than the few countries like Djibouti. So from looking into all these countries, from our exploration on the trend, we understand that there are specific regions and continents which are improving on a similar pace. We hypothesize whether there are countries from different continents which face similar issues, and do they form a cluster. So we did a cluster analysis. We performed cluster analysis to understand which countries behave in a similar manner when some of the food security indicators are taken into consideration. To determine the optimal number of clusters, we used a scree plot and found 3 optimal clusters: low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. You can see the means over here. Definitely a bigger opportunity for high risk countries. The final piece in the puzzle is the regression model. We utilized different models to understand best fit models. Steps were taken to make sure we did not encounter common problems such as multicollinearity. Let's look into the coefficient for high risk countries. High risk countries are affected by factors such as import dependencies, food supply, and variability in food supply. This tells us that not only food supply is low, but also variable. Excuse me. Now let's look into the moderate risk countries. Countries at moderate risk are suffering significantly due to undernourishment, and results suggest that problem is not due to lack of food production, but because of access to food. So from these regression, we actually can get to the predictive model to understand how do we improve depth of food deficit in some of these countries, which can eventually form into different regions and then to the world. We picked up a few examples here. Mozambique, current food deficit 304. To get to 271, we need to improve the protein supply. Republic of Moldova, current food deficit 62. To get to 23.6, we need to work on land equipped for irrigation. Now these are obviously quantitative measures. We have to substantiate it with the qualitative measure. So we picked up a few qualitative measures for some of these countries. Moldova, which falls in moderate risk cluster, can significantly lower food deficit by improving irrigation facility. The country has vast abundance of arable land available for farming. Let's look into the continent too. Africa. Africa, on the other hand, is not only suffering from farming production but also growing population. Here's some of the qualitative findings for us to see what solutions can be derived for Africa. So from a recommendation standpoint, we believe our solution is a repeatable model which can allow government to understand specific factors which can affect food deficit. Instead of deploying a broad scheme with a very high budget, government can focus key areas such as sanitation, farming, food value production, net imports, and rail and road infrastructure. This model also defines how much improvement in each of these specific factors will bring food deficit to certain level. This model can be used by United Nations to define thresholds for each country to remove hunger across the world. Thank you.